like to introduce our keynote speaker, Bob Boni. He developed his own Northwood bloodstock into one of North America's leading harness racing sales agencies. Grew up in Queens, New York, and began his love affair with harness racing at an early age at Roosevelt Raceway. His standardbred ownership began with a horse named Sam Sanders, and it's included the likes of the great Nihilator and most recent superstar, Always Be Miki. It's my pleasure to welcome Bob as our keynote speaker. Bob?
I think the biggest thing from talking to Chip on, what to address and what topics is, I'm kind of proof that it can happen to anybody. I didn't start with money. I didn't start from a family that had horses. As Chip said, my parents bought a horse when I was in the 4th grade, because I grew up in an era when Roosevelt and Yonkers was the ultimate in racing. Big crowds, people were very, very fashionable place to go to, and they bought a cheap horse to race, and that was it for me. And they bought a cheap trotter from Billy Houghton, of all people, because they were going to be smart. They had a trainer who was going to be smart enough, and he was going to improve Billy Houghton, which wasn't going to happen, obviously. And what it showed to me is that you start that way if you're willing to follow a little bit of a path of something that you enjoy doing. Just about anything can happen in this business, because you don't have to, unlike the thoroughbreds, you don't have to be a millionaire to be successful. I think, some of the keys that I think, I've been fortunate to go along with was, I started in 1969 and went to a farm in upstate New York named Pine Hollow Stud Farm, which is no longer in existence, and I started working 85 a week. And they told me that if I worked out good in 2 weeks, they'd up it up to 95. And I ended up staying there 11 years. And it was the greatest education anybody could get, because it gave me great exposure to lots of horses, lots of people. And one of the things that I will always stress about this business, you get to meet some of the most wonderful, most special people you're going to meet anywhere. And unlike other areas, they're very approachable. And I think anytime you can have that contact and surround yourself with good people and not be afraid to ask questions, it just helps everything develop and get a sense for where you want to be. You can come out here, as I'm sure most of you have been out here Jug Week. I'm thinking you have been. And you can walk up to, Hall of Famers. You can walk up to David Miller and Jimmy Takter and Chuck Sylvester and ask them anything you want, and they're more than happy. They're more than happy to oblige you. They're more than happy to speak to you. And, I don't know if it's ownership that you're interested in, if it's working with the horses, but as long as you're willing to put the time in, ask the questions, I can't say enough about how appreciative I am of what good fortune I've had and what enjoyment I've had here. I've been fortunate to have a jug winner, and I can remember that day like it was yesterday or today. And I also reflect back on the people that I've been able to meet that have influenced me and others, and their generosity in giving time, giving input, and just the overall, as much as the horses are the key, to me, I always found that the people that you meet in this business separated from so many others. There's no other sport that you can go into and literally be, shoulder to shoulder with the very, very best. And harness racing, to me, is afforded, a different perspective. And it's allowed me to enjoy some of the greatest thrills I've had, and to meet a Billy Houghton, for argument's sake, Chip and I were just talking. He's number one as far as I'm concerned of all time, and to have been with him, and to associate with him, and to get to know him, to watch how these people work and the dedication. I think what it says is, if you pay attention, if you follow a path, you ask the right questions, spend time, do the work, it can happen. It's not a pipe dream. You see it every year. You see people that you know from here that have good horses, And you position yourself to get lucky, and if you do get lucky, you could get very lucky. I've been very fortunate, but it's something that I don't lose sight of, because I know how, it's obviously a fragile business. It's not an easy business by any stretch, but the enjoyment, the satisfaction, I think in any aspect that you're in, whether, again, owning, training, if you're fortunate to drive, you have an ability with these horses to get close to the horses that I don't think you have in lots of other sports. And all they are, to me, they're athletes. And anybody who's athletically involved, which I think most people are in some respect, will appreciate what they can do, how much they can do, and the accomplishment of winning a horse. If you go in with partnerships, which I'm a believer in partnerships, I think it helps a lot. When that horse races, everybody owns the horse 100%. It's not, nobody ever says, come to the track and watch my 20% race. No, it's come watch my horse race. And I just think the sport of harness racing right now, especially in Ohio, where with the Sire Stakes program now, the way it's developed, has given just tremendous opportunity for so many people on so many different levels, where you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can be fortunate enough to have a good horse. And whether you keep the horse, whether you sell the horse, those are all decisions I think you make along the way. But the opportunity, the excitement, the chance to make money, obviously, because nobody does anything like this. And anybody tells you they do this and don't care if they win or lose, then they're not going to be around very long. They're going to lose. But if again, I'll always go back to the same thing. If you pay attention, if you speak to the right people, and never be afraid to ask questions, I just think it gives everybody an opportunity to enjoy something that I know what it's meant to me. I know what it's meant to my family. A very good example I can give you that to show you how it works out. When we bought Always Be Miki, he had made 3 starts at Meadowlands, and he was very impressive. And the attraction to us at that point was he was by Always a Virgin, and we had owned and raced Always a Virgin. And the gentleman who owned Always Be Miki at that point, Joe Hurley, from Delaware, I spoke to my partner, Mitchell Skolnick, at that point, and I said, I think you might want to, let's start to have some dialogue with Joe, because I think this is one we want to have. And listen, anybody who says I thought he was going to be anything more than a very good horse, no, that's all. I said, I think we'll have some fun with him. I think he's shown speed. He won his first 2 or 3 baby races. He showed high speed, and we had a definite affinity to the horse. We made a deal on the horse with Joe, and he was pleased to get involved with us again, because we had done a similar transaction with Always a Virgin, and it worked out very well for him. We bought half of Always a Virgin at the end of his 2-year-old season, raced him at 3, and now he stands in Indiana. So we made a deal, and when I got back to my office that day, a young girl who works for me, Jill, she's been with me now about 7, 8, maybe 9 years. I said to her, you've never owned a racehorse, have you? And she had the odd broodmare thing. Right? She says, no, never have. I said, I got a horse for you. I said, I think you should take a little piece of this horse. I don't know if I can. I said, don't worry about that. We'll worry about that later. But I think this is a good horse for you to take a piece of. Unfortunately, somebody who turned down, who couldn't take a piece of him at that point, would have been very good for us business-wise, was Dan Plesac. I don't know if anybody watches the MLB network. But Dan's one of their and he's owned horses.
And he's a graduate of the driving school.
Yes, and he raced and trained horses in Indiana. That I didn't realize. And he was he was going through a divorce, and he said, I can't show I'm buying something now. And he reminds me quite often. And so I said to Jill, I think this is one you'll have some fun with. I can't tell you how I enjoy watching the fun she's had with her family. And it's not about the money. I mean, it's always nice, don't get me wrong. But the excitement, the joy that they've had when they've come to Pocono or watched the races. I mean, when I was out here last year at Scioto, it was one of the most exciting nights I've ever had. That's the element that separates it from just being an investment. That there's something, if if you buy tickets, you buy seasons tickets to a ball, watch a team play, there's something more to it than just the investment in the tickets. There's something you're enjoying. You're not getting something back for it. And with the horses, watching that, in particular, when Miki came back after he broke a bone and broke another bone and came back and raced at 4, he was in the Breeders' Crown in Toronto, and I said to her, why don't you drive up? She had her daughter, who was 5 at the time. I said, the husband, I watched she had another girl, and she stayed at home. I said, and the two of them drove up there, and it was a miserable rainy night, and he won the last race. He was 4 for 4 as a 4-year-old. And to watch just the build-up and to watch her little girl, that's stuff that you can't get a lot of other places. And I don't see it in many other sports where you can be that close and go to the barn. Now, for instance, Diamond Creek, where Miki stands, they have an open house this weekend, and she's taking the family. They're going to go to the open house, and they're going to watch him, and they're just going to watch him walk around, but it's something they so much enjoy doing. And it's something that I think it's available, it's accessible. And I don't necessarily know of too many other things that are where you can not only do well financially, especially in a program that like Ohio has now, which is, which right now, if you're racing out here and you race Indiana and Ohio, you don't have to go anyplace else. The two programs are terrific programs. And hopefully if you get the right horse, you get one that you can add a few stakes on and, go someplace else. It's shown that can be done. It's something that I think it's an experience that if you get in the right place and you stay at it, it's not impossible. And I stand here and say I'm living proof, but in 1969 I was making $85 a week and enjoying every moment of it. There wasn't. I was at Pine Hollow Stud Farm 11 years, cleaned a lot of stalls, and I cannot tell you I can remember a bad day. And that's part of something. Being with the horses is something that I think is, if you're fortunate enough to do it, I think it's a very, very, very special experience. And it's something that I would recommend to anybody, and I think it's something people should pursue. Anybody have any questions I can maybe? Yeah.
Are you still selling any pieces of Always Be Mickey?
No. It's a little more expensive now. A little more expensive now. We ended up selling Adam Bowden, Diamond Creek Farm. Bought a pretty good chunk of him just before Lexington. We had worked out something just while we were in Lexington. Matter of fact, we closed on it, I'd say 2 or 3 days before he went the 46 mile. And after that, 7 other breeders bought 5% units in him. So, but it's a little more than, and Jill herself ended up selling just a little piece of her piece. Because I said, this is your kid's college fund now. She's got 2 girls, and that's going to help them. And but the stories that go through with these horses, and I always recommend to people, if you're going to be involved with horses, be involved. This is not something that you sit back and you wait for somebody to call and tell you how you did. Go to the barn, see the people that are there. You get an opportunity to jog a horse or not jog a horse, but just be around, and it gives you a different level of appreciation to see what work goes into it. So, and don't kid yourself. If you have one that's not good enough to win, excuses don't do anybody any good. Just, let's find a place where they can win. But the participation is something that I think if you're not going to participate in it on some level, or with friends or family, I don't think you're going to get the enjoyment or the full appreciation out of what it is to watch a horse race. Because I'm sure you've all seen people, if you don't own horses yourself, horse crosses the wire first. That's a pretty good feeling. And I don't care what class it is. I don't care what level it is. It puts you on a little. It puts you on it's a feeling that's great. And as I said to you, when you have partnerships, and I've been involved in single, 2 or 3 guys. I've been involved in very big limited partnerships. Nihilator was a partnership, and a lot of the people that were involved with him bought other horses later, so it's not, but they participated. They came to the track. They traveled. They went different places. They watched him race. And to watch people enjoy that. And these are people that, you know, some of them are incredibly successful in other businesses, but they don't get that. Nobody pats an accountant on the back afterwards and says, "Boy, you did a great job for me today. It was great." No, but when they win a race, every one of their friends is there telling them how great they did. "Oh, congratulations." Didn't do anything, but congratulations. And it's something that, you know, I've followed sports all my life, and I've loved sports, still do. And this is about as close as you can get to competing, to me, without competing, because you can compete not only with the best horses, but, you know, it's something that I'll always stress. You're dealing with the best people. You know, you can't go to a football game and, you know, go have a conversation with Tom Brady. It's not happening. But you can come here and have a conversation with Jimmy Takter, and he's every bit as accomplished on his level as they are. And it's a different group of people. And I've never met a guy in harness racing from when I started working as a kid to now that wasn't gracious and wasn't accommodating and, you know, didn't give you his time. And I think it's something that goes along with the appreciation that you have the ability to spend time with people like that. You know, great horses, great people. It all goes hand in hand, but I think it's something that if you have the opportunity, I think it's something that's very much worth doing, very, very worthwhile.
Why did you choose to retire and always be Miki? He seemed like he was still on the top of his game.
You know what? It's a combination of two things. He races hard. You know, he gives everything he's got. There's really very little. There was nothing for him left to really do. And it's like the natural progression for him was to go to stud. Would I have loved to, believe me, I'd love to watch him race all the time. but I think you have to at some point say what's best for the horse. And we asked Jimmy about it. You know, and Jimmy is a guy who loves to watch horses, loves to train his horses, and loves to race them. And we asked him what he thought, and he said to be really fair to the horse. He was 5. He's been through quite a bit physically. You just don't know when you're going to push too much. And he said, what more, you know, he's given us all you can give. Why not now? And, you know, and then that becomes part of the business aspect also, that when you have other people involved, that, you know, it's the ability to, you know, do other things. And it just seemed to be the right time, the right progression. I mean, he could go out this year and maybe do better, do something else, because I think he had it in him to do more. But it was the right time. Another
Where
one.
do you see harness racing in the next 10 years?
It's changing, and I think a lot of the change is, I think the move, as I said before, to the Midwest. Canada's in a position now where they've kind of solidified themselves. They seem like, you know, they've got an understanding of what they're going to be racing for. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but they went through a very bad spell where the government came in and said, you know, well, your slot money and casino money's gone, and without much warning. But now they've got where they do have assurances that they're going to have X amount of dollars to race for, which has really, really given a real good kick, upstart to their breeding program again. And I think what I said a little while ago, Pennsylvania's still strong. You know, you're always going to read our story. Apparently there was a story out today where some representative, you know, wants to take the money away, and that's always going to happen because it's a popular thing for some guy who's looking for votes to say. But they lobby hard. The people in Pennsylvania, Jimmy Simpson, you know, Hanover Shoe Farm in general, they work hard at keeping everybody to understand how much this does bring back to the states. And Chip and I were just talking a little while ago, the fact that you had a governor here who was so much in your corner, so supportive, is what helps. And you've got a very good program now here. So between Ohio and Indiana and Canada and Pennsylvania, they're pretty strong. You get a good horse, I shouldn't even say a good horse. A horse that can race enough is going to make pretty good money. There's great opportunity. As long as you've got them in the right spot and race them in the right spot, there's good opportunity. You know, New York also, they've got good sire stakes programs, good overnight programs, and I don't see that changing. The biggest question mark we have now is Jersey, and nobody knows for sure what's going to go on there because it's a very different political climate. But as far as ownership, as far as the next 10 years, I wouldn't worry about the next 10 years. After that, I'm not smart enough to know after that, but I think the next 10 years, you're pretty good in that respect.
Why does Kentucky struggle so much? Is the thoroughbreds just overpowering there, or?
I think, well, they do also. They do also, but it's similar in their situation. They did not have gaming. And what happened when the states that came along, be it, I think Canada, I'd say probably the first one to really have the racino money. Then you had New York and Pennsylvania followed suit. And as that happened, and Jersey had a very strong sire stakes for a very long time. There was no reason the breeding programs couldn't exist there. So once the breeding programs couldn't exist and the sires moved out, there was no reason to keep any mares there. And little by little, that whole thing, it falls apart because they can't compete. The problem we have in Jersey right now, I'm an SBOA director, and it's tough to compete with the purse structures that are at Pocono and Yonkers and the tracks right nearby. Other than the big races at the Meadowlands, the overnight racing isn't very good because they can't. The handle, you're just not going to generate enough money from handle anymore, because most racetracks, the purse accounts are they're funded by the handle, but they're funded by the live handle. And what's happened now is most of your handle is done simulcast or OTB or whatever it is, and that's a very, very small percentage. So the tracks that have the gaming subsidies, they're the ones that are going to survive, and but the jurisdictions that do, on all their levels, there's great opportunity. As long when you start off, you're better off buying racehorses, because even if they don't race where you wanted them to race, they're going to race. And then as you get a comfort zone, then you move into a yearling, young horse, and try and shoot for the moon. But and I'll always say that I think you're always better off I'd rather have 4 people together own 4 horses than each person own 1 horse, because you have your chance then. And the numbers can make you right when you have young horses. And I think you're always better off if you put a group together and 4 or 5 people, and you buy 3 or 4 yearlings if you decide that's the game you want to go. But that would be the way I would approach it. It's too disheartening, both financially and emotionally, when you buy the 1 horse and they don't make it, and it's like, oh, now what do I do? Because it's not like a piece of real estate. A building that's worth $1 million today, if the market's not good, it's still worth $800. A horse a yearling that you gave $50,000 for, if he doesn't perform well at 2 and is really not good, he's a $5,000 horse. So I think you have to be a little careful on how you go about that. But these are questions that lots of people will answer, and just try and seek out the best people you can and ask questions, because nobody really, people don't. I've met very few people who won't respond and won't give you some input on how to go about it, and and ask about people. If there's somebody that you're thinking of as a trainer, there are a lot of people that you can ask and for an opinion, and most of them, they may not say it quite right, but you'll pick up on what they're saying, as to whether that's some place you want to be or somebody that you want to be comfortable with. But in the right circumstance, there's plenty of opportunity. Plenty of opportunity.
In the back?
From the time that you started out up until now, what would you say contributed to the speeds that we see today?
Okay, lots of things. Okay, one of the things that I zero in on a lot is, okay, from when I first started to go to racetrack, which would have been late 60s, early 70s, the drivers, for one, are across the board a better group of drivers because they're all drivers now. When you go in your major raceways, everybody's a driver. When I first started to do this, if you had an 8-horse field at Roosevelt, you might have, Carmine Abatello, George Schulte, John Chapman, and then you'd have 3 or 4 or 5 trainer drivers who sometimes weren't really good drivers. So the speed, all of these guys can get horses to go fast. A lot of people like to point to the breeding. I'm one that will tell you that it's not the #1 reason. And the reason I'll say that, I can point to horses. I'll give you an example of a horse named Toontown. Toontown was a big towner. He got a record of 49-3. He was in big towners, I believe, his last crop. He was I think he was a big towner out of a Colt 46 mare, I believe. Okay. If Big Towner would have had a horse with a record of 49-3 in his first crop, and nothing changed, because this is an old-fashioned bred horse, he would have been considered a freak of a sire. Like, where'd this come from? So what happened? Something changed behind the breed. So I can't point to it and say it's the breed that changed, but I think the conditions, the equipment, the hub rail, taking the hub rail out has done wonders for speed, in my estimation. It's allowed people to drive horses hard every step of the mile without the. If you what I've suggested to people at times, if you take a video, you take a look at a Meadowlands video from the mid '80s when they had a hub rail, and you look at a race now without a hub rail, you'll be amazed how far off the rail they ride. Almost to the point you could almost get a horse. You could almost get a horse in between. When they hit the first turn, you could almost get a horse in between them. And obviously, the smaller the track, the more. But people are going to. I'm sure maybe there was part of your question. People are going to say something about the drugs and medication. I think there's some of that, but there's a lot of legal issues. I think horses are cared for better today. Right across the board, they're cared for. And again, let's point to what I said before, human athletes. Human athletes are conditioned so much better now. I'm not saying they're better athletes, but they're taken care of. They take care of themselves so much better now than was done in a different era. And I think when you look at the horses today, just in the equipment that's available, the therapeutic equipment that's available on these horses, you go into any major stable, after a training session, and you'll be amazed at the equipment that's being used on horses to get them to recover from the training mile or to work on something. And this didn't exist years ago. I remember back in, I'd say, the late 70s, mid to late 70s, when it first became fashionable to inject horses with acid, they would call it, which it's not. It's a name that it really shouldn't have. But they would inject their joints with acid, which really, to make it a little a more realistic expression, it was really like putting oil in, is what they were doing. They were really lubricating the joints. And if you injected a horse, you'd have to lay him up for a while and wait a while, and it would be 2 or 3 weeks before you could race him again. Now, it's, they inject him on Monday and they race him that week. So medication, positive medication has changed dramatically. So I think all of those factors come into it. But I'm a big believer in the driver factor. I think, and once you eliminated the trainer driver that was so much in fashion 30 years ago, just in the nicest way, they don't take care of the horses quite as much. They're more inclined to be out there, maybe drive a little harder than they should.
This year, what we can expect?
Right now, I don't have a 2-year-old this year. I don't have any. No, I've got a 3-year-old pacing filly that she's a Breeders' Crown winner last year, and we bought her mid-season. Adam Bowden and myself. I heard she was for sale. I mentioned it to Adam. He bought her, and I said to him, you know, in lieu of a commission, let me stay in on a little piece. Is what I did, and she's had 2 starts, and candidly, she's been a little disappointing. She's finished second both of her starts, but she doesn't look to me like she has the pop that she had last year. Her name is Some Omen Somewhere. She won a Breeders' Crown at the Meadowlands, 51-2, but she just doesn't seem to have that same, you know, whether she's going to round into shape or not, we'll see.
Who's training her?
Jimmy Tactor. Jimmy's got her. His comment to me was he thought, just today, that he thought that maybe she's tying up just a little bit, and he thought that, you know, a little too much, she's maybe a little too much green grass for her, and he's going to change her diet around a little bit. And if anybody can figure it out, he'll figure it out, and if he can't figure it out, nobody's going to be able to figure it out. That's how I look at it. But I haven't really, you know, haven't had many 2-year-olds in the last few years. It's just I've raced a lot of 2-year-olds. I've been fortunate to come here with some very good horses. And yeah, probably my favorite trophy of all is the jug. That's the nicest. And it doesn't tarnish. It's nice. It's just, and I think, and the funny thing, I don't know if most people know this, it's the most inexpensive. When Nihilator won the jug in '85, and the jug and you've all seen the jug trophies. Is there one? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's not it. No, that's not the ones now.
Close.
Yeah, they're similar, but not quite as big. They're more like that, but smaller, and they've got a great plaque on them. And they were, when Nihilator won the jug, we ordered. I don't know how many we ordered, because they were like, you know, $40 each. And what they would do, they would put, like, if I ordered one for you, Steve, they'd put your name on as the owner. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. Leo, my good buddy Leo McNamara, who passed away last year, he got one, and he shows up Leo McNamara, and it's, you know, it's really a classic trophy. It's, you know, it's not as expensive as the others, but I don't think many people would trade for that particular trophy. You know, and coming out here and him winning was a big thrill. No, it's something that's discussed in opinion, but there are so many good drivers. You know, there are, and I think you know, there are a number that you can pick from, and I'm pretty comfortable. You know, I think everybody. I'm a big, for obvious reasons, but I'm a big David Miller fan, and to me, the best driver I've ever seen, albeit for a relatively shorter period than some, Bill O'Donnell. I thought he was, to me, he could do things that most drivers can't do.
Conformation, is there any 1 or 2 particular traits that you just really believe in or look for?
If there is one in particular, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something else that I would strongly recommend to people who want to participate and want to get an understanding of what they're doing here and not just be passive. I've told many people, get your Harrisburg mixed catalog, the racehorse catalog, and mark off what you would deem the 50 best horses in the sale, the best, most successful, the ones that have won a lot of money, and go look at them. And if you start to look at them and the cheaper ones, there's a difference. And if I had to say what the difference is, the better horses have a little more depth, a little thicker through their shoulder, a little more girth, and they're pretty good-looking horses. And again, when you're trying to put something together, don't be the exception. It's kind of a basic business that sometimes people try and make complicated. Buy a nice-looking horse. You can look at a lot of them. Don't buy, to me, I wouldn't buy a small horse, a particularly small horse. I think it's harder for a small horse to compete today. Most of your better horses, if you go look at any major stakes race and go down the shed row, they're usually pretty decent looking horses. You're not going to find two, there's always going to be one, but for the most part they're good looking horses. We sell a lot of horses in Harrisburg every fall. You know, we have a consignment anywhere from 200 to some years we've had 500. And one of the things that I enjoy the most is because I'll look at every one that I'm selling and is making the notes. And it's always a nice refresher. It's a reminder how when I look at they're categorized usually in the catalog, you know, by their records and so forth. And when you look at the better ones and you move on to the lesser ones, there's a difference. The better ones are a stronger, usually a little bigger, but a stronger, more robust breed of horse. And you know, I think that's an education that you can get by just going there. Nobody charges you to look at a horse, you know, or you can just watch them when they come out. But I think after a while, you start to notice tendencies, you start to notice consistencies, and you know, not that, you know, nobody's foolproof, but don't try and be the one who's, I'm not one who's going to say, I'm going to beat the system. I'm going to buy the little guy who doesn't stand quite right, and he's going to be good. More than likely, you know, he's not going to be good. And you know, try and stick with something that's a little, you know, and there are people that can help you do that. There are people that can point out things to you. But you know, most of your more successful horses are they're pretty good individuals by all the measures of what a good individual is. And for the most, and the one common denominator that I find is they generally have a little more, you know, a little more depth, a little more to them, a little more bone, a little more substance. Not too many major flaws. You know, little ones you can overcome, but not big ones. And it's, you know, again, stay by the basics and ask questions.
Bob, what horse have
Yeah.
you been associated with that has been the biggest surprise?
Probably Miki. I mean, you know, 'cause we thought he was good, but we didn't think he would be that good. You know, anytime you buy a horse, Chip, to me, it's even, you know, when we did the Nihilator stable and all of that, and you try and buy what you think works, and if you get a little lucky, then you can really benefit. And you know, that's the Nihilator was from the first crop of Nihilator, and he was purchased privately. I went around and looked at all the Nihilator. I looked at a bunch of Nihilator first crop horses. That was in '83, and I had a simple theory. Lou Guida we were partners, and Nihilator, for those who hadn't seen him race or aren't that familiar with him, he was a horse that was, it's almost like he skipped a generation. When he went in 49 and 1, it was on, I mean, the previous world's record was 52. So it wasn't like it was close. And he was so dominant that my thought process was, if he's, you know, any new stallion, you're hoping he improves the breed, takes it the next step. We looked at Nihilator as maybe a horse that didn't have to improve the breed and could still be successful. And we put together a stable that year of, it ended up being 7 colts. And Nihilator was obviously the crown jewel in that group. But when we bought him, you know, I can remember buying him. I went out to Logansport, Indiana. Bob Gangloff owned him. And it's funny, when I went out to see him, and I had developed a relationship with Bob because I was trying to buy for various clients his dam, Margie's Melody, when she was in foal carrying him. And we ended up with a nice phone conversation. We got along great. And I went out to, in my scouting, I went out to Logansport, and he picked me up at the airport. He was the slowest driver I've ever sat with. It took forever to get from the airport in Indianapolis to his farm. And now we get to his farm, and it was in February of his yearling year, and there's snow on the ground, and all he wants to do the whole time is, I'm there to look at Nihilator, because he was named. His daughter had named him, And I'm there to look at him, and all he wants to do is sell me. He's got a Brett Hanover colt that he wants. Yeah, this is the one I want you to. And he keeps bringing him. I said, no, I don't want to see the Brett Hanover colt. And he brought Nihilator out, and I have my notes on him to this date. And what I remembered about him was he reminded me a lot of Nihilator, but the way I described it was it's like he took a piece of sandpaper and just kind of refined and smoothed off the rough edges. Because Nihilator himself was not a very pretty horse. And he was one of the exceptions that he was such an efficiently gaited horse. He was so perfect the way that those flaws didn't bother him. But if he was not as mechanically perfect, he would have never done what he did. But he was a big, strong horse, very thick and full through his shoulder. And so we ended up, we drove back, and we had wanted one price, he had wanted another price. And for some reason, and every now and then I think about it, and I sweat a little bit, and I go, boy, thank God, because I still have, I keep all the correspondence. And we put together, it was a package of, we ended up with 7 Nihilators, and prices went from like 100 to 125 is what it was, that's what they were going to bring. And he wanted 125, I said 100. He wanted 125, I said 100. And we drove back to the airport. I almost missed the flight going back because he was just driving so slow. We get there, and you know, I'm from New York, and the slow driving is not going to work. And so we get there, and he goes, Bill Emerson was the sales manager at Kentucky Standardbred then. And he said, Bill Emerson told me this colt to bring 150,000. He could bring that. And I said, Bob, it's February. You got to feed him. You got to stake him. There's commissions. He can run and hit a fence tomorrow, and you're all gone. So it's 100. And 125. I really want 125. I said, well, whatever. So I get on the plane, and we Federal Express him. I said to him, I Federal Express him a check the next day for 100,000. And I said, here's that. And I put another Federal Express envelope in with it. And I said, if you don't want the check, just send it back. And he called me that day, and he said, could you wire it into my account? And I found out, he must have been a great poker player, because I found out afterwards that he had a trucking business, Gangloff did. And they were about ready to close the doors. And we ended up having a great friendship after that. And as a matter of fact, we gave him breedings and things like that. And but we came close to not getting that one there. But
did his trucking business make it?
I think after all that one.
Yeah.
He trained with Jack Ackerman. Trained for him. Yeah. But
His trucks went too slow.
if he drove him, they did. That's for sure. But that's the moments that you kind of don't forget. Because I can remember that day going out there with him and the whole bit, and it was snowing. And I said, "Can you throw him out in the paddock? I got the cows out there today. I can't put him out." And I said, "This is great. Yeah, this is terrific." But we got it done, and he came here, and I told Chip before, he drew the rail, and we win a jug. But for the Oshawa Awards, and Ernie Gaskin, Ernie was there, and Ernie and Jimmy, and we talked, and Jimmy said to me, because Ernie was the #1 trainer for Houghton back then, and he did probably more training of Nihilator than anybody did. And Jimmy kept giving, well, tell him, Bob, tell him who you like better, which one, Miki or Nihilator? Tell him who it is, Bob, tell him. And I said, Jimmy, you're not going to get me to say that. I said, no, come on, but it's true. And I said, okay, how many kids you have, Jimmy? I said, just tell me which one's a favorite. Which one's your favorite? I can't separate them. Other than, well, Jimmy's not around. Is he going to hear this? I hope not, because if I had to lean one way, I would lean a little one way. But the first one is always a little different. That's it. And to spend the couple of, the social aspect thing. If I missed one thing about the racing today, it was a more social business in a different era, and that was a big part of it. That was the fun, you know. But again, to develop relationships, you know, with the Houghtons of the world, and you know, as open as they were, and to have the fun of watching other great, and you know, look, anytime you watch a great athlete, whether it's got 2 legs or 4 legs, it's special, because you realize, especially when you see the ones that aren't as good, you realize how difficult it is to do that. You know, you watch professional athletes, baseball players, and they make it look so easy, and great horses make it look so much easier than it really is. And I think after a while, I know it gives me an appreciation for how difficult it is to get one to that point. I've been fortunate when I was at Pine Hollow to be around a lot of great horses that we raised, and you watch them and you see the difference and you see how they develop, and I think the better ones are different. They act a little different than the others, and I think that's part of trying to hope that you can see the good horses. And you know, like the great opportunity here is, you know, Jug Week, when you can go through the jug barn and see all those horses. And after a while, you start to, there's a difference, and it's why they get to that level. And you know, plus the fact, obviously, they have a different, if you want to say, a different mental and physical makeup beyond their, different insides, the way they go about their work. It's a difference. But when you get one, or you get one that's good, and you know, I've said it before, as long as they win on any level. There's not much better than winning a race to me, anyway. You know, it does. You know, whether it's a cheap horse, or I can remember the first cheap horse I had that won a race, and it was pretty damn exciting. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was something you bought, and you gave it to somebody, and you watched it, and it's an accomplishment, and it's something that I think is very attainable in this business. That's not necessarily so in others. For the love of me, I don't know how people could own thoroughbreds. They don't race. You watch a race, and if your thoroughbred goes to the front and he gets passed at the quarter pole, you might as well just rip up the ticket, because he's not coming back. Whereas our horses are so much more durable in the way they race, that you can maneuver, and the drivers have such have such impact on their success, and they race 20 some odd times a year, 30 some odd times a year, depending upon the class. You know, to have a thoroughbred that races 6 times a year, I just don't know what, it's not something that ever really appealed to me. But my exposure was to the standardbreds, and it's something I'm very very thankful for. Yep.
What would you look for in a broodmare if you were looking to buy a broodmare, like characteristics?
Okay. I think any mare you start with, you want to get as much of the complete package as you can. Okay. I happen to like. You obviously want a fashionable pedigree. I like a mare who's performed. I think it's an advantage to have a mare who has raced for the most part. Not that great mares, unraced mares haven't had great horses, but I think if you can give me a mare who's made 100,000 and has a nice record, they're better off, and they're not that difficult to find, and they're not that expensive. They can be bought. You can get I'll give you relative terms. You don't have to spend 6 figures to get a good broodmare. You can spend 15, 20, 25,000. You can get a pretty fashionable mare, especially depending upon what program you want to put them in. I was very fortunate. I sold a mare to Hanover for. It wasn't so fortunate to me, because I only made a small commission. I sold a mare to Hanover for $12,000. And it's, you talk about circumstance and fate and being in the right place at the right time, how things work out. I happened to be, I'd been speaking to this one gentleman in Canada, Vince Lee was his name, and he had a mare, Rich and Elegant. And I had asked him about her being for sale. Don't know. I'm at Hanover Shoe Farms on a Saturday looking at yearlings. And I get it. This is in the old days of, getting pager calls and stuff. So so I call him up. He says, yeah, Bob, I'll sell her. What do you want for her? Okay. Let me see what I can do. I put the phone down. Murray Brown standing next to me. I said, Murray, I said, what about Rich and Elegant, 12,000? He says, let me check with Jimmy Simpson. Jimmy, okay? He says, oh, you know what, we'll take her. Just have her shipped in. As long as she checks out that she's okay for breeding, we'll take her. They ship her down. She has sold about, I think, almost $2 million worth of yearlings for 12,000. Her first one was 50, and that was Rustler Hanover. And he ended up being a pretty damn good horse, and he was 50. So after that came Rock and Roll Hanover, and I forget she had a Cam's Card Shark that won a couple of million. She's been, you know, she's one of the all-time great broodmares, and she was a nice, at that, she was a worthwhile mare. Nobody knows she's going to do that, but there was enough there. She had a nice record. She was a direct scooter. She had a nice record and enough pedigree where somebody could take a chance. And you know, there's a lot. She's not. I don't want to say that there are a lot of those, but there are more of those than people want to think there are. There are, you know, there are mares every year that don't bring a lot of money that end up producing pretty good horses. Because, you know, the pedigrees now, it's become pretty refined. There's a lot of pedigree in a lot of these mares now, where before there wasn't. You know, you could separate more. Now there's enough. There's enough there where you get the right sire. And I'll say the same thing about not trying to be the outlier. I want buy a mare, buy a stallion that's a good stallion. It's, you know, you're better off buying a successful stallion. You know, you'll hear people pick a particular stallion that wasn't particularly successful and go, oh, he'll be a good broodmare sire. No, he won't. No. And if he wasn't a good sire, he may have something pop up here and there. They all do. But for the most part, you're looking to beat the odds, and you know, it's.
As it turned out with Direct Scooter, he was a better broodmare sire than.
In isolated cases, see, you'll look at his numbers and they'll go, wow, look, he's got great numbers, but very often that's attributed to 3 mares. Yeah. So, but across the board, he wasn't a great broodmare sire, and this was, but she was a nice-looking mare, had enough pedigree. I think she made just shy of 100,000. I think she earned 97, 98,000. I think that's what he was holding out for. He was hoping to get 100,000 on a card. But they're available, and it's just a matter of. I said it before. You can go to a mixed sale and look at lots of horses, and the worst feeling anyone can ever have at any sale, to me, the single worst feeling, and I think you'll agree with me on this, is never look at a catalog and say, that's going to bring too much. Because the worst feeling is standing back there and seeing one that you liked, and just to use relative numbers, that you thought, it might be, this thing should be 50 and I don't want to spend 50. And now it's bringing 26. And you didn't look at it because you thought it was going to bring too much. And if it's bringing 26, that more or less says it can't be too bad. It's not bringing 6. But I don't know about you guys, but I'm not buying one I didn't look at. And if you didn't look at it, you stand there and you kind of kick yourself in the head and go, gee, what? It costs nothing to look at them. Just you go look, and if you don't like them, but at least you've had the opportunity to look, see. And that's one of the beauties of public auction. There's, you know, a couple thousand horses there, and you can just, you know, it costs nothing to look at them. You know, it's like going to the store and trying on some clothes. I mean, eventually you may spend some money if you buy them, but it doesn't cost anything to try. And that's something that it's energy, it's effort, it's work. And you know, I was fortunate that I had a father that worked hard and taught me that there was nothing wrong with it. And you know, I worked on a breeding farm for 11 years, and I said it before, I loved every minute of it until I went into business for myself in 1980. And the one thing that you should never be outworked. And if you're outworked, that's your own fault. Maybe somebody has more money than you. Maybe they're smarter. But you can, if you put in the time, you go to a horse sale, look at as many horses as you can look at, because even if you don't do good that day, maybe there was one yearling that you looked at that you liked, or a racehorse that you looked at that you liked, and you see how it, maybe if it turned out good or how it fared the next year. It's part of you know, it's part of developing that database of where you're getting all your information. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I see today. I think we have a little bit of a lazier buyer today than we had in the past, or they're a little more, no, I shouldn't say it that way. They're a little more specific. They kind of pinpoint the ones they want to look at, and sometimes let some go by that, you know, and very often for that reason, that, gee, I thought it was going to bring too much money. And there's nothing, I don't think there's a worse feeling as a buyer than if you're standing there, because I've had it happen to me the odd time where you're standing there and you're going, gee, I thought that horse would bring.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, you know, why, you know, and then you find out there was nothing wrong with it. You know, so it's, you know, it's all part of it, but it's all, to me, it's all very enjoyable parts of it. It's, you know, it's work, but it's not work. You know, it's something that's, you know, very enjoyable to do. I enjoy the sales tremendously. I don't know how many of you have been to the sales, but there's a great atmosphere there, and that's another place. You know, I mentioned, you know, talking to trainers and drivers here, you go to a horse sale, and I don't care who it is, you can walk up to them and ask them a question, and they'll be more than happy to give you an answer. You know, that's just the nature, I would say, of 99% of the people that we deal with. You know, you're going to get the odd guy who's not so nice, but for the most part, most everybody is very, very, very accommodating. And it's something I think that should be taken advantage more of than necessarily is. You know, it costs nothing to ask questions. The worst thing to do is say, you know, give you an answer you don't like, or who knows what, but for the most part, that's not the case.
Any other questions?
Yes?
In some conversations, I've heard it said a few times that the odds are harder of getting a good horse, like as far as a gray colt is concerned, that some people shy away from like roan or gray colts or mares just based on there being less of them and thinking that those odds correlate to their
I think the
results.
key word is what you just said there. There are less of them. There are certain superstitions that our breed has gotten to the point now, you know, us that are a little older up here, and remember when there were more chestnuts. You don't hardly see chestnuts anymore. If you look at the other breed, you look at the thoroughbreds, chestnuts, roans, grays, they have a little more because their breed has had successful sires from those. We have not. And I think the reason that somebody might shy away from a gray horse is you just don't see as many. So there aren't that many to choose from. I'll give you one that I've used as an example. You know what a watch-eyed horse is? It's a horse that's got like a white ring around. They'll show the whites of their eyes, and you'll hear people go, "Oh, I could never buy one of those." You know, and sometimes they have them on both eyes, where when you look at them, you literally can see the white around, and very often it'll be on one eye. And I can't buy one of those. You might see, if I see one a year, it's a lot. So, but yet Conway Hall's a watch-eyed horse.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody talks about it a whole lot, and whenever they show pictures of him, they always show him on one side because it's on, I think it's on his right.
But I have a Conway and he's got it.
Okay.
Carry through inside.
But you know what? If you buy one with a white eye, and he turns out to be Conway Hall, that's okay.
Take him home.
That's okay. But that's a superstition or whatever you want to call it there aren't enough of them. You know, it's like watching a baseball game and some guy saying, you know, geez, he's had no success against this guy. He's never hit him good. He's had 5 at-bats. You know, so, you know, or someone will say the opposite. Oh, geez, he's had great success against him, and he's 3 for 6. That's too small a sample. And if you look in your sales catalog, you know, for a little while we had the grays because we had Log, and he never had a son that really was good enough to be a breeding horse. And to have a gray horse, one of the parents has to be gray. Yeah.
In Michigan.
Right. No, I remember that was Greg Mara's horse. Yeah. But never enough to prepare. And we haven't had a good chestnut horse. I couldn't remember the last time there's been a good chestnut horse. And there was a period of time when, we had a fair amount of chestnut horses. You know, Romeo Hanover won the jug. He was a chestnut. His brother Romulus was a big, beautiful chestnut. But I don't think people intentionally bred them out. They just needed one to be good, and they weren't. And I don't think it, the standard bred is more and more becoming, it's a bay horse. That's about what it is. You'll get a few diversions here and there, but it's a bay horse. When I was working at Pine Hollow, one of the things I did, I'd come in the morning, and I would take the markings on the foals. If we had something born. And it's hard to understand how happy I was when I had one born with some white. I don't care if it was a little star, if it was a little snip, because we had so many, and you'll attest to this with the USTA, bay colt, no white markings. Please, it just for identification purposes. Just for identification purposes, when you'd have them out in the field, I don't want anybody to get, and we get a lot of bays with not a lot of white. And you look, when you watch thoroughbred races, which I'm sure you all do, you'll see that there's roans, grays, chestnuts, white up to their hocks, and it's just a matter they've had more stallions because they breed natural and don't have, and a lot of them have not had the size books that we've had, whereas for many years, especially before the restrictions were put on, we channeled them into the handful of popular studs, and a lot of them were, not. There wasn't a horse of what you'd say a horse of color in the bunch. I don't think there's ever. I can't think of the last really good U.S. chestnut horse. I think was it the Crow horse? What was his name? Captain Crow, the one that came on the Breeders' Crown here, the French trotter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was chestnut, but. As far as horses here, it's we just don't. So I wouldn't shy away from one if I saw one, but you just don't see that many. We sell a whole bunch of yearlings every year. I can't remember the last gray or roan that we've sold, and that's just a function of mares and what have you.
Got time for one more question. Well, Bob, we want to thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.